And we're live. Hello, everyone. This is Chundabiku, and
Nisabho Biku as
all
well.
right, it's good to see everyone on the live stream. Very lovely. I suppose most of us survived the storm. My mom just remarked that she received 2 feet of snow, so that definitely went over our what we got over in one night. But yeah, we've had a bit of a snowstorm here, and both Venerable Nisbo and I have been
Snow blowing.
snow blowing. We have this really nice snow blower that Ajahn Sranto got for the monastery. Well, I should say all the kind lay people got for the monastery.
We're grateful.
Yeah.
It would have been hours
Yes.
and hours. So,
So luckily, it's about 45 minutes.
but it was nice to have the snow, Ajahn. It was. I've been in Thailand for several years, so it's a pleasure to actually be like having a white winter for at least a few days. But now it's all melting, so
It's melting pretty quick. It's supposed to snow again on Thursday, but yeah, it's interesting how the perception changes with all of a sudden everything's just white and a little bit sloggy to get through, and yeah, it's quite nice to experience that every now and again, but not too much.
a little bit. It's good enough.
Yeah. So yeah, we're doing well. We're just in our retreat still, and kind of right in the middle, actually.
Yeah, another month and a half or so of it around that. So,
and not too much going on. Just meditating, enjoying our time together, and quiet. So
parents are visiting.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
parents
good.
are here.
A few days.
And alms rounds going well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not too
We
much.
had a vice principal of I think we said this, but he offered spontaneously, which was great. And then we had a seventh grader who grew up giving alms at the Montessori school. She contacted us wanting to offer every week as well. So it was her and her, I think, third grade. Her sister was in third grade who both offered. And that was just very sweet to see someone so young who had faith at that level. So that was quite heartening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You gave them a blessing.
I did.
So very sweet.
So Ajahn,
Yes, we have some questions. There's not too much on my mind, or something. I'll get rolling a bit.
well, this looks like
Yeah, go ahead.
well, how about this question, Ajahn? Before we get into some of the other ones we had on the back burner. Jeannie asks, this is a big topic, but it would be lovely to hear how each of you has learned and practiced metta in your lives as bhikkhus, just if there are no other pressing questions.
You've talked a lot. Yeah, you've talked a lot about metta. So you're more of the
Let's
Metta
see,
King.
the Metta King. I'm not prepared to accept that title, but yeah, I suppose for me, there's a few skillful. Metta is such a powerful practice for me that I find it's almost like the defilements sense how potent it is, and so they are especially quick to block up my roots to it. So I'll find a phrase, and then it'll cease working quite, after a few days, sometimes, or image. So I find I usually have to really move through different techniques, which is why we mention all these skillful means around metta, and they sound silly, but I really do find that it's kind of necessary to pull in a bunch of different, skillful means in order to access it and sort of rotate through them and have a toolkit. So one we've mentioned before, which sounds cheesy, but it's very effective, I think, is shrinking the people and bringing them into your heart rather than sending the metta out, because for me that dissipates the field of metta very quickly. Another would be the practice of really thinking of someone helping you or looking at you with caring eyes, and just using that feeling, because the feeling of warmth is what you want to kindle and you know, give momentum to, I think. And another one, just when one's um, breath awareness is more developed, then really bringing the awareness to around the heart. I think you have to be careful not to bring it too intensely right to the heart, because it can be too much, but gently there in that area. And I find that accessing it through the body is a really robust way for me to access it. And then making a habit before, I think when the subconscious is really malleable, like right on waking, it's like the self is trying to crystallize around something, and so frequently it's an argument from the previous day. So instead, really making a conscious effort on waking up and before going to sleep to, you know, recount things one has been grateful for during the day, and really make that a practice of metta. Najin Viradamo suggests, like, right when you wake up, bringing the awareness to the heart and just lying there for a while, and kindling it then. And just the final thing is, for me, the so frequently what gets in the way of metta is this sort of constant annoyance, say with someone in your life or something. And for me, counteracting that through really trying to look at people in my life who I'm having some difficulty with as teachers, as effectively kind of bodhisattvas sent to instruct me and teach me patience or whatever, changes the perspective quite a lot. So those are all little means, but I think just through action and really living, what I think action informs how our feelings manifest. So I find just living with someone and, helping each other over time has a huge softening effect on my heart as well. What are your thoughts, Ajahn?
Yeah, I think there's sort of the traditional methods of using metta, which most people are aware of, and I found that quite useful in meditation retreats. Actually, just saying the phrases and bringing up usually teachers and my parents, people who have been very helpful to me, and really kind of as we talk about, it's really generating a feeling. It's not to say things in an empty way. It's to figure out a way that you can feel this loving kindness, this care, concern for yourself, for others. I think that that tends for me to actually open up the mind quite a bit, so that it's not so constricted and it's not so critical. It feels less sort of nitpicky and obsessed with with either my problems or other people's problems. And I think for me, one of the things about metta that's very helpful is kind of identifying when it's absent in myself, and to see, like, oh, okay, this is not in my heart right now. There's not a sense of kindness, and it's sort of that's pervasive. It's not just towards others; it's towards myself. And so I can, whenever I detect that, then I know, oh, there's no metta here. There's no quality of caring, loving, a sense of warmth and kindness. And so I really register that absence, and then say, okay, there needs to be something done here to brighten the mind, to bring the mind towards this kind of kindness. And one of the easiest ways, I think, to generate this is just to challenge my own thinking process. If I think, oh, that was a terrible meditation. Oh, was it really? What makes a terrible meditation? Or just today I was thinking, both along lines of gratitude and along the lines of sort of, just kind of thinking about the positive things in my life, the good things that I've done, the things I've done for other people, the things I've done for myself. And sometimes it can be quite shocking. You say something kind to yourself, and what's that voice? I'm not used to that voice so much. Most of us are used to this, as I've mentioned before, this tyrant, this kind of inner critic. And we're very well versed in the inner critic, and we know how to get a good rant going, either about ourselves or others. And it's quite unfortunate, because it it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just, we move in the direction of the negative. And so I think with, as we've been talking about, right, effort, it really is, trying to bring the mind towards a wholesome state, so that we're able to experience peace, and we can rest, and we can have that quality of mind that is not only focused, but it's ready to receive the Dhamma. It's wieldy and ready. And I don't find for myself that it can be done very easily if I'm in a critical state at all. And that's, one bent on ill will, and kind of, you have some story about another person, or just self-criticism, usual self-criticism. And so bringing, just trying to challenge those thoughts, is that really true, what I just said? That I don't know, just constantly there's something like just to think about all the positives. Like if I think, oh, this kuti's really small or constricting, or it's kind of damp in here or something like that, I think, well, actually it's quite beautiful. This kuti's actually very large, or it's so spacious, and it's quite warm, and I feel really happy to sit in here, and I can have time alone. And how many other people have this kind of quality and time alone and live in this beautiful place? And I was thinking about just receiving Amsud and how nice that is. So all of these things, they start to generate, oh yeah, like, what am I thinking? My life's quite blessed. And then also just gratitude around that, that feeling of gratitude, a sense of like, there's so many things we can be grateful for. And there can be difficulties in our lives, or difficulties we're having with other people, but those are so minute compared to all the things that we can actually generate in terms of our own happiness around the things that have been good to us, all of the good things that have happened to us in our lives. So I think for me, that's really how I try to bring in metta, and it's it just kind of, it sort of allows the mind to rest a bit from that inner critic, and the inner critic kind of can fade in the background. And I just find that that's so essential and necessary in practice. So,
well, and what you're speaking about in terms of the inner tyrant, Ajahn, I think that's really important. Like Ajahn Amaro says, good metta practice you have to be quick on your feet for, because so frequently, you begin with that sort of rote instruction to spread for another person you're having trouble with, but frequently we're really the people who need it. I know frequently it just won't be going anywhere, the practice of spreading it towards another person. And then you realize that you're just like, this is really hard. Like you're in a really hard spot, and just acknowledging that, like, that's really hard. And like seeing how much maybe we just need some compassion from ourselves, not some like energetic, maybe we don't have the means or resources at that moment for some energetic metta towards ourselves, but just the acknowledgement of how difficult life can be at times, and turning that eye towards ourselves. And, and that's the weird thing is external metta practice, so often it's like the inner tyrant co-opts it, without us seeing, and that same aggressive driving urge completely misses the point, which is that we are really suffering and this is difficult. And so I appreciated Ajahn Amaro's advice that like good metta practice requires one to be quick enough on one's feet that you can see clearly when focusing on another person just isn't where you need to be. And I think frequently we're so drained that's the case. So I think you pointing to the inner tyrant is very relevant.
Yeah, and I remember last week Adam brought up around pain, how to deal with, it was back pain in particular, but just like I was reflecting on that later, just like chronic pain and how much that can darken the mind, and then one can spiral into a very negative state. I mean, I think most people are aware of that. I mean, if you have a body that's been so blessed that you haven't experienced chronic pain, good for you. But it's something that, just like any kind of movement of the mind, we go into like a dark sort of corner, and it's sort of like we know it, or we kind of like we can just stay there, and for some reason it just, I mean, it feels comfortable to be in this kind of critical state, this dark state, or this, it's never going to get better, or whatever it is, or I'm just stuck here. And what I say by comfortable is it's like we're just used to that. We can be used to that, and then there's not a sense of another, like a perception outside, like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be stuck in this. There's another way. And actually the way I'm relating to my own mind, the way I'm relating to negative experiences is not really useful. It's not helpful. And it's hard, as you were mentioning, it's really hard to recognize that, because it's just such a quality that many people are used to being in. It's just, either critical of others, critical of ourselves, critical of our life experience, and stuck in negativity. And it's amazing how, pleasant moving out of that is, or realizing that we don't have to be stuck in these states. But yet we do it. It's a habit. And it's so easy to just get into this habit, get into a rut, and just stay in it, just because that's what we know. So I think the harder part around metta practice is really like making that effort, because it's like if a wheel is in a rut, it's really hard to get it out of that rut, and you can try and pull it and move it, and it's just not going. And so it's just more comfortable being in this dark state. But with the right effort and the conviction and the faith, that there's another perception, there's another state that will allow one to really rise above and be able to experience the Dhamma in a much clearer way, to see dukkha much more clearly. It's sort of allowing it in, but also seeing that you don't have to be basically brought into this sense of like permanence, that everything about your experience is in a permanent state.
An external reference point.
Yeah.
It relates to Karina's question from last week, which was how, if our minds are in a lethargic or dark state, how does one brighten it?
I've been talking. Well, I mean...
No, it's good. So the reflection I'd have on that one is I think frequently, like, developing a tiered practice is really helpful, in that we're not necessarily, I think, aiming for stillness all the time, but rather a grace of movement. So depending on where your mind's at, knowing what's appropriate at that point and applying it, and that the practice can look like different things at different times. So I know for me, if I sort of sit, in the afternoon and my body's in a really, say, tight or hot place, or in the morning if I sit and the energy is very stuffy, I could just, endure through it, but I find it's frequently much more useful to go for, do a bit of exercise, take a cold shower. I recommend that a lot. I think it's very helpful. Qigong. I find writing poetry or doing some art can, if the problem isn't with the bodily energy, then that can really bring immense resources to the fore of sort of, this quality of rejoicing and brightness in the mind, and then sitting. But in terms of if one is sort of in the practice already and just sitting, how does one work with that? I'd say that frequently the breath can be overly calming in such states, and the sound of silence, actually, I've heard someone refer to this. This is, once again, the meditation object sort of taught by Longpo Sumedho, which is when things are quiet, there's sort of a vague hissing or ringing in the ears. And if one cultivates that perception, it can get very loud and constant, and it comes naturally, say, when the mind gets calm. And it's very bright, and I've heard it referred to as the auditory equivalent of the perception of light. And I know it's what Ajahn Amaro used, because when he used the breath, he said he was nodding off in his early years, but then he switched the perception of light, and he took on the practice of sitting all night for years, and I think he used the sound of silence to do it. So I found that consciously using the sound of silence really can keep one quite much more awake. And then sometimes listening to a Dhamma talk I find is really helpful in the early mornings for me. It's not my best time for meditation, so bringing in some sort of helpful Dhamma talks quite nice for me. Yeah. Thoughts, Sajjan?
Well, the Buddha has a sutta around brightening the mind. So he has kind of recommendations like pull on your ears and splash water in your face, look at the stars. One thing I do in particular around lethargy or this kind of nodding that most of you are very aware of. If you're not aware of it, you might be doing it. But that's just, I actually imagine the sun just right in my face. So I'm, often in monasteries, you're meditating in a fairly dark room. But I just imagine that sun, and that's quite helpful. Or a candle, just staring at a candle. I do want to say though that I have spent times, just kind of lolling about and nodding my head, and it's I don't think it should be denied that the fact is that can be quite pleasant. It's just this kind of annihilating sort of experience where you're just like, someday the bell's gonna ring and I'll wake up. And it's not, it can actually be pleasant if you're not fighting it. And that's a problem, because if one gets into a habit of a meditation becoming lethargic and tired, that becomes the habit of the mind, and that's where we just think like that's what meditation is, or we might not think it, but that's where our mind goes. And I've definitely seen many practitioners, including myself at times, just make a habit out of nodding during meditation. I've seen a couple of monks learn how to rest their chin on their chest here and sleep for an hour. And in a monastery, it's understandable. People are getting up at 5 a.m. And not in a monastery, it's also understandable. Or getting up at 4 or 3. But I also want to state sort of emphatically that unfortunately there's an emphasis with just sitting through this. And that it's not like people say necessarily to do that, but if you open your eyes sometimes in a meditation hall, you could see maybe a third of people or half of people nodding in the early morning like that. And I'm thoroughly against this. I think stand up, try to actually like wake yourself up. And for monks, it's a little bit, you're not supposed to stand you're not supposed to stand over somebody senior to you. There's kind of these little nuances about our practice. And, but, if you talk to the person next to you or whatever, or you find a place in the hall, for example, to do it. But if you're not in a monastery, you can just do it anytime, but stand up. That's the greatest thing to stop your lethargy. It's open your eyes and really do. It's not, what I find is I don't want to do that. I want to just keep sitting, and it's not helpful. It's kind of a waste of a sit. You're just sitting there kind of trying to fight your sleepiness, and the fighting actually sometimes makes you even more tired. So I think really try to wake yourself up, stand up, walk, open your eyes. You can try to recite suttas or whatever it is, but wake yourself up.
Pull on your earlobes, I believe that Buddha says.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of things, but I find standing is about the best thing. And if I'm actually starting to kind of nod while I'm standing, which can be dangerous, then just doing walking meditation.
And honestly, I find if I'm in a spot on my own and things just really aren't going anywhere, sometimes if I let myself like consciously like lean and just for like 3 minutes, like literally 3 minutes.
Yeah, there's a time for sleeping.
Yeah, but literally, like, it's not really sleeping. It's like somehow the 3 minute allowing myself to kind of drop and come out, it refreshes me. And I haven't heard that taught in meditation books, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's actually very effective for me if the other means aren't working. Is sometimes the energy just seems to need to kind of drop and then come up. So
that does happen. Like after the meal, like as monks, we're eating usually just one meal a day. Sometimes there's a light breakfast, but the meal is larger, and so you get a bit knocked out after it. But I found that there's almost always a lull, and sometimes just sitting, just trying to sit through that is quite helpful. You kind of sit through it, you go through that period, and there is some drowsiness, sleeping, and then you just pop right back, and then the meditation's quite good.
Yeah.
Taking a nap,
That
can help.
yeah.
Getting more sleep if you're trying to go on a lot less sleep than you're used to, then maybe getting more sleep. So yeah, those are some of the things.
We had a question on mudras, I believe, as well, Ajahn.
Oh yes, we had a question that came in on email around mudras, um, and as far as I know, the idea of that was holding one's hands in a particular way, and that's really, as far as I know, I don't know really much at all about mudras, to be honest. I do know that that's quite prevalent in the Tibetan tradition, as well as developing mantras, which we have a bit in the Theravada tradition. There's also sort of building, like there's tantra, and there's all kinds of things that you can do with mudras. I think the question about what was like, is it helpful, is it beneficial, and this person had said that it was helping them, and so I would just say, if it's helping you and you're finding it's working, it's bettering your meditation, then go for it. Use what's useful. There is a Lumpur Tien, who actually taught a technique where, I don't know the technique exactly, but it's basically an arm movement. So you move, you have your arms up and you move one arm out and up, something like that, and down. And
Vague jumping jack.
Yeah, it's sort of, yeah. And so one is doing that during the meditation, and left arm and then right arm, and that was his main meditation technique, and that probably kept him up. So I would say whatever works is my recommendation. If you're finding putting your hands in a mudra works, sometimes it can get a bit complicated, and your mind kind of starts to contort around that complication. So that's just something to be aware of. Trying to get your mudra right and your mantras all wrong or whatever. So just be careful for that complication, but use whatever is, I think, quite helpful to your mind if you're able to discern that.
Mm. Yeah, I also don't have experience, or I don't have much experience with mudras. I find that I believe it's called the Samadhi or Jhana mudra, which is the just hand on top of the hand. Actually doesn't work for me too much. The bodily energy flow gets too hot, so I frequently put my hands on my knees, facing down, or if the energy is really coursing and is quite hot, then I turn the palms up. And for me, that's a much more pleasant experience than the completed circuit. So it's not exactly mudra, but it's my one reflection on the hand position. So,
yeah, I never thought of it that way, because I also do the same thing.
Yeah, somehow this gets it a little too much. So putting the hands on the knees, sort of like that, or if it's really hot, up. So I do find that helpful.
One of the monks at Abhayagiri uses this Lumpur Tien technique. Sometimes he'll also use like these. I think many of you have seen these like Chinese balls that you rotate around in your hand. He's made a lot of them, and usually out of wood. So that's another helpful thing is to use different things that will keep your mind engaged. Whatever works. So anything else? Let's see. We have any other questions from anybody? There was that one around trauma. So Venerable Nisabho has pointed out, to trauma being stored in the body, as we fully realize we are not these bodies, can all trauma be vanquished by that very understanding? Which is, I think, a hard question to answer.
Yes, it is. What would you say, Ajahn?
Well, I think trauma that's internalized in the body. I definitely think that it's not just possible, but it's a thing that happens. You think about people. I remember hearing about a Catholic nun who had disrobed after many years, and when she came back to the monastery where she was a nun, all the other nuns kind of got very uptight and kind of I don't know, they were just a bit animated, and she came back and she recognized that in her in her belly, she had been keeping this incredible tension, um, and she had just had this tension with her the whole time she was a nun, and she was holding it that way, and this trauma had it wasn't, I don't know if it was necessarily out of a trauma, but it sounded like it was traumatizing, and it just stayed with her body, and she really needed to just develop that one thing in her life after she disrobed, was just like softening her belly and trying to, and she it was just such an emotional experience for her to hold this in, because she was so tight around everything, and the other nuns felt that around her as well, very strict, and so she spent, I think, like many years dealing with that, and didn't realize it, I think, until she started encountering like meditation, and recognizing it in the body. So I do think like trauma can be brought out, and you can really try to understand it, and understand what you've gone through. People, I think, throughout their lives have held traumas in their bodies in these particular ways, something like that. And so through being aware of our own bodies, yes, then we start to see like how we're holding things, or where we might be keeping enormous amounts of tension. I know Ajahn Jeff talks a lot about energy flow, and that can be blocked in certain areas. So, but in terms of completely vanquished, I don't know, maybe it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I would also, I mean, what you're reflecting on with the nun is really relevant, Auden, I think, and also to say that, not to not to cast too light uh, mm, the word trauma. I think obviously there's some situations where it's most appropriate, like if someone's really been through, some deep childhood tragedy or incident with the body, but also just to recognize that in another sense that word can be applied to most of us in a very relevant way, in that most of us are very much trapped up in our heads, and that complete alienation from our bodies, from the lower half of our bodies and the backs of our bodies, uh, and just the lack of awareness around all that part of our being is a certain trauma as well, and has very real effects, because the body is where the softer elements of our nature kind of reside in a certain way, and as you develop awareness of it through breath meditation, you do, I think, gain access more to those softer energies, and you realize how tight and hot existence is when it's trapped right in this small balloon on top of your body. Um, so I think, yeah, like one wants to, if possible, and if one is used to, interested in the breath meditation, to develop a wider awareness of the torso, of the body, and frequently one side is more numb than the other. Frequently the back is numb, and one can sort of correct that by imagining breathing in through the back as light, say through the kidneys or the shoulder blades. And I think as the sort of feeling in the body really soaks that sense of well-being up, that one realizes how kind of traumatized, alienated, and unnatural most of our usual state is. And then I think you do become aware of like small knots in the body from certain specific traumas. Like I know Ajahn Jeff recalls releasing a sort of knot of energy in his foot, and having this flash of this image where he was a child and fell out of the second story of a barn onto a nail, and the nail went through his foot. So he'd carried that bodily trauma for a long time, and he stated frequently that a lot of the karma we have is stored in the body. So I think releasing those things as much as one can to develop a really nourishing breath practice is helpful. But the Buddha was very clear that one does not have to eliminate all one's karma to attain awakening. It would be impossible to. And the body is imperfect and pained by nature. So there may be some people who really can develop things to, really smooth out all these things. But I would think that if, one can gain awakening from any one of the four levels of jhana, the suttas say, and yeah, I mean, I think once one has gained awakening, then these knots in the body don't matter all that much. So at some level, I think the answer would be yes, but it is possible to move past all this stuff without actually having untied every knot in the body. But this is far beyond my personal experience, obviously. And I think insofar as one can smooth out those knots, that's very helpful. But also developing insight into the impersonal nature of the body is really important, because we do get sick and the body does fail. And no matter how good our breath meditation is, at some point, is a good chance that the body's going to betray us. So preparing for that at the same time seems important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite helpful. I remember this book, The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen, which was it at one point I didn't read the book, but I saw part of the movie, I think a long time ago, and basically it had like these beings who, they were like gods or something, and their heads were detached from their bodies, and the heads were kind of basically stuck in thinking and pondering and talking, to each other sometimes, or just off in space. And then the bodies were kind of around doing their bodily things, mostly sort of just trying to enjoy having a body. And then they tried to get these two together, heads, and become sort of beings. And so like beings with heads. And most of us, I think, have a harder time with the practice, with what the Buddha has been teaching, what the Buddha has taught us to do, with kind of like letting go of just the obsession we have with ourselves, with our, just the thinking process, who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, what other people are doing. And I think most of you can probably agree that immersing yourself in your own body is not habitually a thing that's very easy for us to do. It's enjoyable, it's pleasant, and it brings so much insight, but it's like a magnet. We just keep gravitating back to the head, and it's like, you can like see that in other people. It's just like a head moving around, and the body's completely forgotten. It's just gone. And like, I guess, you think like you just got to shove some things in certain holes here and there to get some nutrients and water, and it'll keep going, so that the head can just keep on doing its thing. So that I think really, like, so much of our practice is just grounding us back into like, oh, what do I have here? I have this body, I have this experience that I'm often just completely cut off from. And it's not too much more complex than that. I mean, and then you from that, then we see dukkha, and we see the way we create this self-obsession process that we have, and we try to make everything permanent. But when we look at the body, we have that chance to see just immediately into those three qualities as being, there isn't really a self I can find in this body, and there isn't anything permanent. It's constantly changing, constantly moving, and I will look at my own body and say, no, it's not moving. I can look in the mirror, I recognize who I am, so therefore how can it be changing? Or we disguise our own aging or our own sickness, and so it's, and especially dukkha. Dukkha is, like just think about just the need to kind of move all the time. That it's often we're doing that because we're trying to mask our own pain, and the more that we see that, the more clearly we can really gain wisdom and insight. But we have to really place our understanding in seeing the body in a different way, or just seeing the body, period, experiencing the body. And yeah, I would just say, ask yourselves, like, just in terms of simplicity, like how often you're able to tune into your body, to tune into your experience of it. And my experience is that the mind can tune in very easily at certain times, and then other times it's just off. It's just off in some the other world, and then the body's forgotten. So as much as as much as we've all heard that over and over again, it is like, just immersing oneself in one's own body is really the answer to seeing clearly into the Buddha's teachings. But as we're talking about traumas and kind of the problems of the body or illness, I think it's not actually vanquishing the illness or the problem or traumas. It's really seeing that they're actually there, and being like allowing them to be there, and not thinking that we have to get rid of them, and we have to get younger and take all these different medicines or have these surgeries, and I'm gonna have a new body or whatever it might be. And yeah, I think there's quite a lot of beauty in just allowing ourselves to see that we're aging, we do get sick, and to find some sense of that's right. That's exactly what the Buddha pointed out, and that's exactly what we see if we allow ourselves to.
I remember I just was reading a sutta where the Buddha, there's a layman who I think is deeply ill who approaches the Buddha, and the Buddha says that's how it is with the body. It's a burden, and who, except out of pure foolishness, would think even for a moment that their body was healthy, even for a moment. And I thought it's quite a helpful, it's a good, it's a good reflection, absolutely, that this is the situation.
It sounds harsh, but it's sort of like, I think it's reality, like we want to have perfect health,
yeah.
But it's just not. One thing is right, and then something else goes wrong.
And it's the strange paradox as well, because at the same time, while we're detaching from the body in terms of appearance and our dependence on it being healthy, or our belief that it will be healthy forever, at the same time, through this breath meditation, say, or an increased awareness of it, you do realize that there are immense resources in it that one can access. So it's the strange paradox where we're developing awareness of, say, the subtle body, while becoming less and less kind of in a clinging relationship to the external, body like that. So that's my own kind of process with it.
Yeah, and I think it's like because one could hear these things and kind of get depressed. Well, Buddhism's just all around like sickness and aging and dying and so morbid and dark, and it's like, well, no, that's real. That's part of our lives. Nobody escapes that. So what can we do with that in order to be liberated from it? And it is possible to experience liberation. It's possible to no longer experience death and aging and sickness again. So it's actually like kind of the good news religion. Well, it's like, yes, there's a way to actually find comfort and clarity and understanding, even while we recognize dukkha.
And also, Ajahn, the just how much we judge people on their bodies. I know Ajahn Panyavado has said that we, like, maybe 90% of what we think about people, especially initially, is based on their appearance. I think people who, say, have a difficult appearance or a really, are very beautiful, also experience immense suffering around this, because you'd never know. Say you're someone who's quite attractive, you never know why someone's approaching you. You always are second guessing their motives. And my experience is as the body is seen more and more as just a veil for something much more beautiful. And we can say that intellectually, but unless we've repeatedly contemplated that from a still spot in meditation and really brought it repeatedly to the point where there is some understanding of the body as just, as the Christians put it, a mantle of clay, then suddenly people's brightness of spirit is visible through that in a certain sense, and the homeless man with the big jacket, who, if you're subconsciously so fixated on the body's appearance, you would just dismiss. Suddenly, it doesn't matter so much. It's the spirit you're seeing, and or you're more in tune to the inner beauty of someone, and that's such a gift to be able to give people, to see who they really are. And um, yeah, the body's just a source of immense difficulty when we can't see past the veil for the face behind it, you know. So yeah, all we're doing is drawing back the veil a little bit, or just stop trying to make ourselves not be so fooled by it, you know. And I think that's a great gift we can give people, because we invest people immense with a huge amount of judgment and meaning based on their appearance, you know, and ourselves too. God, like bodily self criticism over one's bodily appearance is brutal, and this practice doesn't. It's not negative body image in a bad way, because negative body image is comparing one's body to other bodies. But this is just seeing that all bodies are kind of these weird, awkward creatures that are, you know, they look funny, they're strange, they do weird things, they get sick. Sort of like a awkward pet that you kind of, you know, have a good relationship with, but you don't, you know, depend on or something. Mm.
Yeah, you have to, I think the important thing, it's hard, personally I find in my own practice it's harder to work, like to work on, you know, another person's body in terms of like changing the perception. But I know for myself, if I'm focusing on my own body, it's a lot easier to work with that perception of kind of like, what is this? And you know, in our tradition there is the recommendation the Buddha has, you know, in several different ways of kind of examining the body and looking at the reality of it, or what happens after you die, or as you're aging, or what happens when you kind of open up the body and look at all the parts. Mostly the recommendation is actually do it on yourself first. Don't kind of use other people's bodies, because it's kind of, the mind is very slippery, and it's much more attuned to looking at one's own body. So that examination really then allows you to see like, oh right, this body is the same as these others, and there's no difference there. And then we kind of do see we're all brothers and sisters in old age, sickness, and death. And once you see that, you have this relatedness to another person, rather than objectifying them or thinking they're more beautiful or less beautiful, or whatever it might be. So it is we've been talking quite a lot about the body, even in the past many weeks, but it's something kind of really to explore. You know, just there's so much there that we can use for our practice, and bring us, you know, back from sort of the brink of just being obsessed with our thoughts about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, just to briefly touch on Catherine's question, which is related to getting to know the body, like you're saying, Ajahn, just like when I have trouble applying visualizations to light moving around the body, I sometimes you can use like that is a form of applied thought and evaluation, which can help meditation and help focus. But you can use a verbal one, like asking yourself, like, can the awareness, I find verbal directions phrased as questions are nice for Westerner or modern meditators, because they are more gentle. Just being like, can the awareness drop a little more into the body? Or, but frequently, yeah, if the mind's not active, it might not want to do a visualization. So just placing it in different parts of the body, like down by the diaphragm, on the sides, and just sensing the sensations there, and then moving up slowly, like, you know, the neck, breathing there for a while, and then the nose, and just very simple with no visualization. That's more often what I do, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think everybody has their own propensities. So some people are more visual, some are more auditory, some more, you know, like just experiencing the body is a particular way for them. The, you know, the palpable feeling. So I think it's also important to explore, you know, try things out. Sometimes people get used to a particular mode of meditation, and then they do try something out, and oh, I don't like that, because you're used to the other form of meditation. So it is good to try things out, but if they don't work, then there's no problem. It's not an absolute requirement. There's all kinds of different techniques, so many that Buddha taught. So yeah, I think we're coming to a close here on the live stream today. So it's very nice to see so many people joining us. And we'll see Venerable Nisabho, if he lives so long, till Friday.
Thanks, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Some good Theravada love there.
That's
That's
right.
what we got.
That's right. You never
Okay.
know. So
Great.
be well, and I'll see you next Tuesday.